Episode 1, we got this all cut out, measured out and disassembled. I found that my blank here is a tiny bit too thin, so I went and got some more timber. However, it's 3/4 of an inch thick, so I'm gonna have to reroute the depth in this. But today we're gonna measure out and fit the inlay. I'll see how I go at getting it level. So I'm gonna set up my little routing table that I got from Marketplace for, I think it was 60 bucks. Some guy was getting rid of all of his woodworking tools and he had this routing table and I thought I'd take it off his hands. I've been on Marketplace a lot lately. It's dangerous, especially out here in the States. Also, picked up this sick Lamb of God shirt, As the Palaces Burn. I think it's from the 2000s, so that's right. Anyways, let's get stuck into it. Alright, so I have cut my block out, and again, you don't need all the fancy bandsaws and stuff like that in order to do this. It just kind of speeds up the process and it makes it a little bit more streamlined. As you can see, tighter grain lines on this side and then they kind of spread out a little bit. I've cut this in the same orientation. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is take some measurements and then I will place my negative router template over the top of this and I'll round the corners in so that we can just drop this straight into here, level everything, and then have some fun with a little bit of grain matching and lining all of that up. All right, so let's see how square our route was. Just going to use some vernier calipers. Check this angle and lock that in. Pretty damn square on that edge. Pretty damn square there too, so pretty good effort for just going around and routing each corner the manual way. I don't have to worry too much about squaring this off perfectly because I have 2 machined edges from the factory and I know that this is perfectly square, so I can kind of line these, and then I already have my first edge started, and then from both of my reference corners I'll measure in and down, and then I'll get my final fitment, and then I can just align this block, then I'll come over here and then I'll route in this edge, I'll come over here and I'll route in this edge. I'll probably do the clockwise motion again, just so I know that each time I align this, I'm nice and square. I go a little bit overboard because I do not trust double stick tape. I was routing in Evertune once and I had a piece slip. Didn't damage the guitar, thankfully, but scared the life out of me. So where I can, I usually like to tape things from the top. But when you're routing edges like this, it's just not possible without getting the tape and everything in the way. And then what happens if you're routing through any tape, the adhesive kind of gums up the bit and it overheats and then it destroys all your router bits. So don't route through tape. Got my template on. I'm going to round out this corner. I've got just a tiny bit of overhang here and some up here. I just want to buzz that off on the router as I make my first pass. And then I know I can start with 2 clean machined edges to take all my measurements on so I can reference the size of the actual block. Rule of thumb with any depth cutting or plunge routing is to not cut more material than the width of the actual cutting surface. So this is a 1/2 inch round cutting bit. I don't want to cut any deeper than a 1/2 inch, which I can't anyway. This bit is only a 1/4 inch deep, so I'm just going to cut a 1/4 inch at a time. I'll have to do 3 passes each time as I go around. I didn't purchase a deeper routing bit. I'm just going to go slow, take little passes each time. We'll end up with a good result at the end of it. Before we start routing, this is something I learned when I was building resin tables during lockdown in Melbourne in 2020. I obviously wasn't getting too many guitars, so I kind of took it upon myself to take on a new hobby and got a little obsessed with it. I learned some skills that kind of transfer over to my guitar and the stuff that I do with guitars now. So our normal cutting path will guide along your workpiece, and as it guides, it will spin counterclockwise. So that's a traditional pass. The other pass is called a climbing pass, where the feed direction of the material and the cutting direction of the router bit are the same. Is the router bit traveling along this way, and spinning that same direction. This leaves a much smoother, finer cut. This is important when it comes to grain direction. I do a little bit of a mixture of both. So this is a test piece that I tried. When it comes to routing a block like this, you've got to consider that you're coming across the grain as well as along the grain. When we get to the edge of the grain here, and my router bit's coming around, it might have a tendency to want to pull and chip some of this area off on the side here. It's because I don't want to splinter wood at all. I will come in from both directions and I'll kind of stop towards the edge. I will place my piece here and I will drag it backwards as I kind of gently twist around that router bit. And I won't go all the way to the edge because I don't want to chip off any of my end grain. You feel free to do it however you like, that's just how I do it. Keeping in mind that your traditional pass is like this along the grain, and then your climbing pass climbs with. So two different finish methods. I just want to make sure that I get a nice clean cut regardless. See here, just this little lip that I've cut. So I'm gonna bring my router bit up again and I'll do continual passes over this piece. You kind of get the idea, right? I'm gonna get rid of any little burrs like this on the end. You can just get a little bit of sandpaper or just gently drag a blade across it like that. So now we have a nice rounded edge. Now I will take measurements from here down to get my width. I'll take measurements from here back to get my depth. Highly recommend getting yourself some yoga blocks. These are like 12 bucks from Amazon. Put the guitar body above your work surface. I use these when I'm setting up guitars because I don't want the guitar on the bench with all the tools and all the shavings and all the little bits of fret wire that I have floating around when I'm doing various jobs. Keeping things away from the work surface ensures that the customer gets his guitar back without any new scratches. You want to make sure that the customer puts the scratches on the guitar, not you. So that's going to be this measurement. And I know that's going to be that measurement. Alright, so I'll put a mark here, here, here. I'll run a straight edge. Using multiple flat things to kind of align and get square is just kind of how I've always done things. I don't know, man. If there's a better way, tell me. It might be the long way to do things. I'm less concerned with taking my time than I am with getting it right, you know? So that's what matters. Someone's paying me to do this, so I want to measure 3 times and cut once. Got to take off a little bit extra this time. I'm going to do a few passes. I don't want to just bury the router bit all the way in here. It increases the chance that it's going to grab. I would just rather avoid that, especially because I'm doing this manually. Everything's exposed. Last thing I need is something to grab. These mitts, they earn me a living, so I want to be careful. I don't want to injure or damage myself. If you have areas on your route that are a little bit darker than the rest, it's an indication you've either spent too much time there or the bit is a little bit blunt. I know I just spent a little bit too much time there, so keep that in mind as well. I mentioned safety and then I forget to put my glasses on. I can take my reference off either side and then route this edge and do each corner individually. I don't want to circle over the entire edge, especially if I'm on a bit of end grain like this. I don't want this bit to come around and clip and catch anything or destroy the last 30 minutes of mucking around with this. All right, got it mounted for my last pass. I know this edge is square, I know this edge is square. These are obviously done as well. Moment of truth. Let's see how it fits dry and if we need to sand anything or make any adjustments. So it's a pretty tight squeeze, same as that side. Sometimes you can put a little bevel on the edge, it might just get caught. If it's super tight, some of these wood fibers will even get in the way. So just give them a bit of a scrape down. 3 out of 4 edges just slotted in. I don't want to force it because I don't want, you know, a whole bunch of surface tension in the top of this. And then even if you're using the same wood, 2 different pieces will swell and contract at different rates. So I don't want that to happen and then I get like a split in here over time or anything. So it would go down if I forced it to. But what I'm going to do is take a little bit of sandpaper and just kind of sand away some of these burrs in here, and then that's going to help things slot in nicely. Also got to take in mind, when I apply epoxy in here and on this, what's going to happen is it's going to get into the end grain and this piece is going to swell just a tiny bit. So kind of also need to consider that. Okay, let's get the shallow router bed out of this. Also, I kind of like this feature. This little lock on this router, and then I can just unlock this. On the other ones, you've got to like dick around with 2 spanners and it can just be annoying. This original route needs to be 3/4 of an inch deep. It's about 18 millimeters. What I've done is I've just used this as a reference for how deep I want to go, and I've left maybe 1/4 of a millimeter because I just need some room to sand and flatten things out, and I don't want to go too deep into the guitar. Then we run into some different problems. Once we're done, it should almost be level, and then I don't have to do a lot of sanding over the top. I'm going to put some tape over the body because I'm going to be resting the router directly on the guitar. I can use the ball bearing against the previous route as my guide, so I don't have to play around with making things square again. I'm only going to have to do 2 more passes to get to depth. Done. Now that should be pretty much 3/4 of an inch, or roughly the thickness of our transfer block. So I've got maybe 1 millimeter. So that's all I'm going to have to sand off the top. I'd rather work from the top down than have to put anything in here to pack this up and bring it to the surface. I'm just going to hit the edges a little bit. That's all gone in pretty seamlessly. Oh my gosh. Sweet, so our block is done. I have a little glue brush. This is cool, I've never ever seen one of these before. It's silicone tipped, so you can brush on any sort of wood glue, and then when it dries you can just sort of peel it off. I'm using Type Bond Original. The last time I did this, I used epoxy. It came out great, but I did notice that once the block was in, join where the epoxy meets the wood is way harder than the wood itself. I'm just hoping that the finished cured glue is just a touch softer and I can kind of drag my object through where these 2 pieces of wood meet, and I get an even more seamless looking kind of wood grain join. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue this in. It's important to look at temperatures and things with your glue. So it's about 5-6 o'clock in the afternoon in Arizona. It's still quite hot. I think it's about 90 to 100 degrees out. I've let these kind of chill inside for a little bit just to bring the temperature of the glue and the temperature of the guitar down. Just something to consider. All my finish and setup work will actually be done inside so that I'm not having issues with things moving or certain glues not setting. So get a little bit of glue on here, get some glue inside the cavity as well. I'm not going to hit this here, I've got a little setup on the ground. I'm just going to tap this in with this over the top. Okay, so some of these grain lines I got pretty close, like these 2 here, they kind of run off at a bit of an angle. These ones are all closer together. So by the time I come through and I match those manually and I sort of scrape them through, you'll see everything will look really uniform because ash has quite a defined figure. This has been plain, so it's not as pronounced. That's a job for me to make it look more pronounced in the next step. I don't know if you can see it on camera. Everything else looks pretty clean, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'll still run some glue around the outside edges just to make sure I fill any gaps in. I can make up like a bit of a solution with some glue and some very, very fine sawdust that I'll have once I've sanded this, and you can use that as a bit of a putty as well to sort of fill in. I'll let that dry. I'll get it all sanded and flat, and then we'll do some grain matching. So again, guys, thank you for watching. I love doing this kind of stuff. I love talking about it and walking through the process with other people and getting ideas and everything. So yeah, again, if you want to see the next episode, you can just follow along. Once this series is done, I'll have a bit of a bonus episode. If you have questions, just leave them in the comments and I will get to them. I did have questions about the headstock end of this guitar. By putting an Evertune in here, kind of avoids the need for the locking nut. So what I would like to do is try and graft on a piece of rosewood on the back here and then cut a traditional nut. I think Graphtech do like a nut delete that you can install on an instrument like this. However, pretty sure they don't make them for H strings. So let me talk to my customer about that first, because that's completely up to him. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.